Hi everyone, Smatho 10 and Big Hef here from Daily Fantasy Rankings with a special edition of the DFR DFS Down Under show. Nice short and sharp edition for Saturday, a semi-final between Geelong and Collingwood. No mucking around with two thumbs up. We're just going to get straight into the footy here as I welcome my co-host Hef. How are you, mate?
I'm good, mate. Disappointed I didn't get the two thumbs up for my win on Friday night, but yeah, that's a bit presumptuous, but yeah, hopefully we've done well. We'll get stuck into this one.
Let's get stuck into this one. As always, if you need all the data tools, cheat sheets, and previews for free for AFL Daily Fantasy, make sure you get to dailyfantasyrankings.com.au. All right, so this is Saturday night. Geelong are $1.60 at the time of recording, taking on Collingwood at $2.35. The line's 6.5, and the total's 110.5. Pretty interesting. There's a low total there, but with the weather's fine up in Brisbane, so probably the Pies' lack of scoring has been baked into the market here. At the time of recording here on Thursday evening here in Hobart, DraftStars popped out a $75,000 single slate contest. DraftKings haven't put their contest out this stage, but check out their offerings at any time. As always, we do go through the team news, but it being a Thursday, we don't have those teams as of yet. But we are speculating that Joel Selwood is questionable with his surgery on his finger. Probably likely he'll play. Jack Stephen did his hammy in a scratch match, so he's no longer available for selection. And the word is that Collingwood's probably unchanged. Maybe a change with Varco might possibly come in for the Pies. As always, you can check out the free tools on the DFR website. And there's a couple of good themes here, Hef. Targeting the back line against the Pies always seems to work there. Geelong loved kicking the ball, building out a halfback. So the Cats are in play there for the backman. The Cats also possess the ball in high numbers, the third highest in the league. But on the flip side, Collingwood are actually number one for possessions accumulated over the season. So this could be a bit of a high fantasy scoring matchup, this particular one. Hef, what are your initial thoughts on this particular matchup for Saturday night?
My initial thoughts were Geelong. Well, I thought Geelong were going to win against Port Adelaide, but they sort of shot themselves in the foot a bit with their kicking a goal. My initial thoughts were...
You were pretty strong on them, weren't you? Let's be honest.
Yeah, I was. I had a shocking weekend. I think I tipped all four losers in the first round, so maybe you don't even need to ask me. But I initially thought, they'll probably get past Collingwood, and then I sort of remembered Collingwood can be a bit of a bogey team for them at times. They won the last two contests between the two teams. I think it's going to be an absolute red-hot ripper game.
All right. Let's break down some ruckman, and at this stage, Brody Grundy up against Reece Stanley with a bit of Cameron and Cox on the side. Now, some viewers would have been a bit surprised at what was happening on with Grundy last week, but Collingwood did come out and say pre-game, if you're watching the pre-game coverage, that they were going to monitor Grundy going up against Nick Nat. So I don't think that's going to happen this week. I think they're just going to play full ball Grundy this week. What do you reckon against Stanley, who is around that 11,480 price, but Grundy's now at 14.5, which is the best he's been all season? What do you think?
I think you can make a great case for going all in Brody Grundy here. Had his pants pulled down by Natanui, and it's to the point where they were using him as sort of the backup ruck to go against Oscar Allen, just because he was getting such an absolute hiding. But early in the year, we saw Brody Grundy doing what he does. This was against Darcy Fort, not Reece Stanley, but he had a big 119. Natanui's been his Achilles heel this year, but it just means we get him cheaper for this week. And he's only 3,000 more than Reece Stanley. I think he's very, very easy to play here, Brody Grundy. He'll bounce back for sure.
Now, any love for the lesser likes, Cameron or Cox? If you check out our cheat sheets on DFR, we've got Cox projected at a very nice number at $7,000. He's going to be pulling in a bit of ownership there, would you think?
He probably will be. I really don't like playing tall forwards against the Cats. I've sort of mentioned that a number of times through the past few years. So, I don't think we'll see too blue moons in a row, will we, for Mason Cox? Even though he had 53, he got sort of 36 in about 5 minutes there against the Eagles. So even the rest of the game, he was a really low-scoring player. I don't have any great desire to play either of them. And especially if I expect Grundy to dominate the ruck, I think that will reduce the amount of ruck time. Cameron will get a little bit in there, but you're basically playing these guys as key forwards. I don't see much upside with either of them.
Okay. All right, let's move on to defence. And as alluded to, you want to be targeting Cats against the Pies here. And the one that springs out straight away is Tom Stewart. 13,170. He's projected the highest backman on this particular slate. But we need to find another guy to play with. Now, do you want to link up with Henderson or Zach Tui at a little bit higher price, or should we look for some cheaper options such as Colin Dashney or Buse or even Jack Henry if he gets a game?
Yeah, I think I really love Stewart. As much as I love Grundy, I also love Stewart. And he's another guy coming off a lower score, but in that matchup against Port Adelaide, not great for backs. Previous to that, he is really consistent, scoring really well. 13k seems too cheap for me in what looks a great matchup here. So I think this is a spot we're going to have to spend down if we're keen to play a lot of Grundy and a lot of Stewart. So I'd be quite happy to link him up with one of these Geelong backs. We've got 5 options under 9k. Can't make a great case for any of them, but we're going to have to spend down somewhere. Jed Buse is a guy that we talked about was likely to be quite popular last week, and I didn't want to play much Buse if that was the case. I don't know if he'll be quite as popular this week. Maybe it's time to jump on him now.
Could be the case. 46 points last week, and at 8,800, that's not too bad. I mean, they'll open up some other options throughout your team, but I can't see. Like Jack Henry had a 52 last week. He'd be popular as well at that cheaper price. So
yeah, I think it's a bit of a raffle trying to pick which one of these Cats cheap guys has a reasonable game, but I think at least one of them will, and pairing them with Stewart, that will save us a bit of cash to spend where we need to in the midfield for sure.
Now we haven't really talked about Collingwood backs because they're actually pretty overpriced in an awful matchup.
Actually, there is one Collingwood back I want to talk about.
All right, you talk about the one because we're not going to talk about any others because they're pretty bad players.
We know Geelong are really good at cutting down on uncontested ball and uncontested marks, which is really going to sting these high-priced backs. But Pig Greenwood had a job on Tim Kelly last week, which saw him spend a lot of time through the middle of the ground. That succeeded. I assume he might get a pretty similar job again on someone. Maybe he goes to Dangerfield. I think he's a bit of a rough, tough unit, Levi Greenwood. He'd probably love the chance to go with Dangerfield. But, yeah, if they use him in that similar role, 8,300, he is a very reasonable, cheap option for your backline.
Yep. I don't mind that at all because all the other options you can safely ignore, especially like Crisp and May. No, they're just so overpriced for their upside for this particular matchup without that uncontested ball, as you mentioned. All right, let's move on to the midfield. And, as I said, probably no cheap options as the theme of the finals this year. It's tough for fantasy play, but we've got to find some options here, balanced options that are capable to go a little bit more than usual. Is there anyone that sticks out in that 5-figure low range there for us?
One of my favourite players, the Main Train.
The Main Train.
I do love the Main Train because it does seem to be. He's bounced his roles around a fair bit this year. He's been back. He's been up on the wing. But his last few games, 4 scores above 52 at 10,000. He's definitely a guy that can open up a bit of salary for us. And he's even got 90-point upside, Chris Mayne, especially if Collingwood start chipping the ball around sort of against what the data is telling us here against Geelong. But he is a very good tackler, Mayne, which gives him another avenue to score if they cut down on the uncontested mark. So he's a guy that I would look at on the cheaper side. Parfitt's always a guy I end up looking at. He was fair again last week after a really good first half. But Dacos is a guy that I like the look of, but hasn't really stamped himself as a real fantasy threat just yet. But he's just so polished and clean. I think he can get us upwards of 70-odd points there, which would be reasonable at 12,000. So they're the cheaper guys I'm looking at. Obviously, the expensive guys, Guthrie, Adam, you know how much I love Guthrie, Taylor Adams. We got a bit of a discount on Adam Treloar, who's down in the 14,000s. But I think they're almost locked in to have good games, these guys. Collingwood mids, we know they love to dominate the ball, and we do know that Geelong can give up points to the inside midfielders, where they're cutting down the outside ball, but you can get them on the inside in terms of fantasy. So it's hard to fit these guys in, the expensive guys, but I do think they're pretty good plays nonetheless.
All right. Let's move on to the forwards, because this is, again, like the previous show on Friday night, you do need to spend down here in the forward line. I did touch on Mason Cox. You weren't too enthused about that one. So we also got blokes such as Ablett, Dalhouse, Hoskin Elliott, but Jamie Elliott as well. They're all around that 9, 10, 11k mark. Possibly if Varco returns to the side, he might be a good option as well. Who are you looking at here? This is a tough one. This is another tough slate.
It's finals footy. It's tough, Smatho, because these guys are what they are. They're really well priced. Really fairly priced. It's hard to really make a case that one guy's in a much better spot than another. Really, now Varco, you mentioned him. I'm looking at Varco not so much as I guess he's somewhat playable there at 6,000 if he gets a game, but I'm just thinking back to when these two teams played early in the year, and Varco had a really tight roll on Gary Ablett. So I'm sure Ablett's going to be quite popular, given he's under 10,000 again, the little master. But if Varco does come into the team, I'd be really wary that's going to happen again. And even though we got 19 possessions with Varco breathing down his neck early in the year, he only scored 45 fantasy points. So if Varco comes in, I'd find it quite difficult to play the little master.
Any love for the higher average options? The Tomahawk at 12,900. You know, he ended up being in one of the higher fantasy scorers for last week. Surely, and he's got a good matchup. Like the Pies' defence, key backman, are not exactly fantastic.
They're not. They did a reasonable job on him earlier in the year, Hawkins. He's very hard to play though, nearly 13,000. You can spend another 1,000 and play Dangerfield, even with the possibility of that Pig Greenwood role. You do have a few midfielders that you can run through the forward line. Tom Phillips, Parfitt, Elliott. I find it really hard to give you a solid push for any of these guys, though, to be honest. Myercheck is a guy that we mentioned last week, and he came back to bite me in terms of me as an Eagles fan with a couple of really important goals. We've talked about Gary Rowan, but it's just not happening for him. Very, very hard to find a forward to have great faith in on this slate, I think, Smatho.
Yeah. No, I have to agree with you there. You might just have to...
Maybe go Dalhouse. Under sub 10k, he just seems to get you 50 odd at least. He's a guy that you might take him and then go with a high upside guy like even Brian Myers bouncing back off a really poor showing against Port. He can get deep into defence on the wings from that sort of half forward pocket role that he plays. So every once in a while he comes up with an 80 or so, and it's going to be low owned. Maybe that's an approach to take with your forward line.
Fair enough. So in summary, look to get to Grundy, Tom Stewart, probably one premium mid, 2 to 3, those lesser guys, and then if you got any money left over, try and get to some good options in your forward line. If not, you'll be paying down in no time to cram them in. So good luck with those teams. Now, Hef and I will be back next week to break down the prelims. which are going to be tough Saints with
They're going to be just as hard.
Port Brisbane in there for next week. And then also, we'll be back next week with a bit of a preview for the DraftKings World Cup, Hef. Now, this is something that could be up your alley. We'll have more details on dailyfantasyrankings.com.au. But yes, the end of October will be the festival of DFS around the world as Australia goes up against the nations of DraftKings. So keep an eye out for that on the website and through our social channels at RankingsDFS and on Facebook as well. Hef, thanks for doing double duty again on the show for these two particular games. Sorry they're not the easiest games of DFS that you've ever broken down.
That's all right, mate. It's hard work, but that just opens up some opportunity if you get it right, doesn't it?
Fair enough. All right, we'll catch you next week on the next edition of the DFS Down and Under show. Thanks, Hef. We'll see you then.
Thanks, mate. See ya.
Cheers.